And I think that's really at the heart of why the Epstein thing is so distressing. I mean, the guy was some weird sex freak who was abusing girls. We knew that. But the fact that the US government, the one that I voted for, refused to take my question seriously and instead said, case closed, shut up, conspiracy theorist, was too much for me. And I don't think the rest of us should be satisfied with that. And by the way, let me just say really quickly, because I was so mad about it that I think I found out part of what's going on. I think we are going to find out more. And I think the truth, for whatever it's worth, in case you're interested, is that the DOJ didn't release lots of incriminating sex videos with Epstein and his billionaire pals because they don't have them. They don't have them because when the original search warrant was served, 2007, I think, possibly 2006, I think 7, it was basically designed to protect Epstein. The search warrant was written in such a way to make sure that the feds never got their hands on the actually incriminating evidence. It's another way of saying the cover-up has been going on since 2007, almost 20 years. And so the real question is not, was Jeffrey Epstein a weirdo who was abusing girls? Yes, we can answer that. The real question is, why was he doing this, on whose behalf, and where did the money come from? And those are the questions that need to be answered. And I think it's entirely fair to ask them. And it's not adequate to say anyone who asked them is somehow desecrating the memory of little girls who died in Texas. I'm not going to put up with that answer. I don't care who gives that answer. That is not acceptable. And I think the real answer is Jeffrey Epstein was working on behalf of intel services, probably not American. And we have every right to ask, on whose behalf was he working? How does a guy go from being a math teacher at the Dalton School in the late 70s with no college degree to having multiple airplanes, a private island, and the largest residential house in Manhattan? Where did all the money come from? And no one has ever gotten to the bottom of that because no one has ever tried. And moreover, it's extremely obvious to anyone who watches that this guy had direct connections to a foreign government. Now, no one's allowed to say that that foreign government is Israel because we have been somehow cowed into thinking that that's naughty. There is nothing wrong with saying that. There is nothing hateful about saying that. There's nothing anti-Semitic about saying that. There's nothing even anti-Israel about saying that. I've spent my entire life pretty much in Washington, where I knew and loved a number of people, including one very close person who worked at CIA. That has never prohibited me from saying, I think the CIA has done some horrible things, murdered a bunch of people, participated in the murder of a sitting US president. It's got a whole trail of crimes. That doesn't make me a disloyal American. It doesn't make me anti-American in any sense. I was born here. My family's been here for hundreds of years. I love this country. That's why I live here. So criticizing the behavior of a government agency does not make you a hater. It makes you a free person. It makes you a citizen. You're allowed to do that because you're not a slave. You're a citizen. And you have a right to expect that your government will not act against your interests, and you have a right to demand that foreign governments not be allowed to act against your interest. That's not creepy. It shouldn't be forbidden. And yet all of us have trained ourselves to believe that you can't say that somehow, that that's like too naughty and forbidden. And the effect of making that off limits has been to create a lot of resentment, and I'll say it, hate, online, where people feel like they can't just say, like, what the hell is this? You have the former Israeli prime minister living in your house. You have had all this contact with the foreign government. Were you working on behalf of Mossad? Were you running a blackmail operation on behalf of a foreign government? By the way, every single person in Washington, D.C. thinks that. I've never met anyone who doesn't think that. I don't know any of them that hate Israel, but no one feels they can say that. Why? And I think the longer that we play along with it, the more subterranean and creepy and hateful the conversation actually becomes. So I think it's better just to say it right out loud. Did this happen? And of course, that question has been asked to the government of Israel, and their answer is, we're not going to tell you. And I think our answer should be, no. As long as we're sending you money, if you were committing crimes on our soil, we have an absolute right to know, did you do this or not? And yet everybody has been so brainwashed into thinking that's somehow an expression of hate or bigotry when it's not. It's a baseline question that every U.S. citizen has a right to an answer on. What the hell was this? And by the way, if it turns out that it was nothing at all, that somehow Jeffrey Epstein really did earn $165 million giving tax advice to somebody, which is, for the record, a lot more than most people pay their accountants, and that none of this was actually a foreign intel operation, and that there was no blackmail involved, that actually Bill Gates was just hanging on the island because the weather was especially good. No one was videotaped doing anything immoral or illegal, and then that was used against them to get them to obey. If all of that is false, then just tell me how it's false. But don't call me a lunatic. And when Fox News runs a piece, as they did yesterday by Hugh Hewitt, saying that anybody who's got even more questions about Epstein is some kind of nutcase with an unhappy personal life, who's spending too much time on Twitter in the fervid fever swamps of conspiracies, up yours, buddy. Then why don't you answer the question then? Don't let anybody insult you, anybody, and I mean anybody, ever get away with insulting you instead of answering a legitimate question, okay? Ever. And by the way, you will hear certain people say, well, that means you hate the person. No, it doesn't. I've got a bunch of kids. I would never let them get away with that. If I caught one of my kids, smoking weed in the bathroom at my house, and I was like, are you smoking weed in the bathroom? Shut up, racist. You hate me. No, you're my child. I don't hate you. Answer the freaking question. Were you smoking weed in the bathroom or not? I'm not the criminal here. You seem to be. So I just think it's really important to get into that headspace. And even now, when people talk about this topic, I can promise you, since I spent all day on the phone yesterday on this topic with informed people, they're like whispering certain words. And I'm like, why are we whispering? Why should I be ashamed as an American about wanting to know what the hell that just was? Why should I be embarrassed? I'm not the bad guy here. Why should I be embarrassed to ask, what's in this war for us? We got to go to war. Shut up. You're a bigot if you don't want it. First of all, I'm not a bigot. But second, that's kind of not the point. The point is, what's in it for us? Why is this a good idea? Shut up. And it's exactly the style of argument that I voted against, and I will never accept it. I don't care who does it. I will never accept that. Give me a legitimate answer, a reasonable answer, a sincere answer, a good faith answer. We may disagree. You may say, as a good friend of mine who's like totally deranged, but a good person, said to me yesterday, Iran is the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. Reading the talking point that apparently everyone, a bumper sticker that is for sale somewhere, I guess. And I'm like, okay, I don't even know what that means exactly, but how many Americans have been killed by Shia terrorism in my lifetime, which is 56 years? I can't think of any. I'm sure there have been some in the United States. There have been Shia terror attacks sponsored by Iran in the U.S. I can't think of any. There was 9/11. That was a Sunni terror attack. And then there's the drug epidemic, which has killed more than 1 million people during that same period. People I know, my next-door neighbor's kid, dead. People, a bunch of people I know have died, and a bunch have been totally screwed up and taken out of life, basically. Their lives have been hollowed out. They're husks. They've been totally destroyed by drugs. That's the reality that I live in the United States. So you're telling me Iran is a bigger threat than the people peddling this garbage? I don't think so. Not where I live, it's not. Oh, shut up. And the person literally said, we're going to have to agree to disagree. Disagree with what? What are you even talking about? But at least he gave me an answer. He didn't say, oh, you hate so-and-so. He didn't go immediately to motive. Okay, so this is always the tell. This is when you know you're dealing with someone who has zero interest in getting to the truth of the question and instead is trying to make you be quiet in order to roll over you and make you obey. And the tell is when they go immediately to motive. Well, you just hate some group, or you're taking money from some other group. And neither one happens to be true in my case, but I always feel like saying, well, okay, what if I am getting paid? Or what if I have some kind of creepy bigotry? Which I don't, because I think it's immoral. God created individuals. Each one knows the hairs on your head. Each person has a soul. No person is seen by God as a member of a group. Each person is seen by God as an individual. So I don't like that. And I really don't. I'm not just saying that. And I mean every individual on the planet, regardless of what he looks like or what he believes. That is true of every person. And I sincerely mean that. But even if I didn't, maybe I was some like full wacko. And maybe I was like taking tons of money from some bad country, one of the bad countries you're not allowed to talk about or like. Qatar! That's the most hilarious. Qatar is kind of controlling our conversation. Qatar, evil Qatar. I am laughing. I've actually been to Qatar. It's awesome. Never taken a dollar from the Qataris or the Qataris or whatever they're called. It's a great country. But whatever. But even if I was like on the payroll of Qatar, which I guess I can't now. But anyway, even if I was, it still wouldn't make the question any less relevant. Why is this a good idea? And their refusal to answer that question lets you know right away that you are not dealing with a person of good faith. You're dealing with a propagandist who is trying to control you. And I would say at exactly that point, that's when you say out loud, I know who you are. This is all fake. You can't even answer the question. You're trying to make me shut up because I'm a bigot, like the liberals did 7 months ago. And that's why we voted them out. So I'm not putting up with that. I voted against this and I won't tolerate it. So the second point I would make, before maybe taking a couple of your hostile questions, I hope about Qatar, is I was brooding about this today. What about the Epstein story is so uniquely infuriating? And I'll just say, I mean, I've never met Epstein, but I mean, I know a million people who knew Jeffrey Epstein. It is true that he was around. Like everyone knew Jeffrey Epstein. I don't think I was cool enough to actually meet him, but like he was just a guy who was kind of circulating around, like this rich guy who knew everybody. What is it, and everyone knew he was a creep, but then there are a lot of creeps in that world. Just telling you what you probably know already. What is it about Jeffrey Epstein that's so infuriating to people, so infuriating that it's actually causing seismic political problems? And I hope that they'll address it and it'll get better. I really do. But what is it? I'll tell you what it is. It's the frustration of normal people watching a certain class of people get away with everything every single time. That's what it is. And that drives me absolutely bonkers. By the way, it's one of the things that bothers me about immigration. You know, as someone who got arrested in Syracuse, New York as a kid because I had an expired driver's license and brought to a cell, I'm watching people come, that actually happened. I have done time. It does change a man. Yes, I joined a gang. But I watch, 60 million people come into the country illegally or overstay their fake refugee status or whatever. I mean, the whole thing's a scam. And they get housing vouchers and free education and free cell phones and plane tickets. It's like, wait a second. Not only are they not getting punished for breaking American law, as I would and have, they're getting rewarded for it. The unfairness of it drives you crazy. And it's